couple of years ago, I took a worship for a group of teachers up in Brisbane, and Brendan Pratt happened to be there, and he said, "Daryl, you really need the pastors to hear that worship so that you can show the heart of Adventist education, what our passion is as Adventist educators, and what we are trying to share in terms of serving the mission of the church." So what I'm going to be sharing to you today is a message that I delivered to teachers. But hey, at the end of the day, pastors, teachers and Ephesians are the same class of person. So I do feel at home, and I'm happy to treat you as my colleagues today. The title that I'm going to share with you is Jesus on the Bench, Not in Our Schools. A friend of mine, Michael Horsley, from Edmund Rice Australia Education, was talking to me one day, and he said, "Daryl, I don't want Jesus to be on the bench in our schools. In other words, we don't want him on the sidelines." And that's very true too for Adventist education. That's the last thing we want. We want Jesus to be absolutely front and centre. This is a picture of Sophie Murphy. Sophie was on a flight from Sydney to Melbourne a year or so ago. It was late at night, people were restless, people were tired, and they were particularly cranky on this evening because they couldn't land. They were circling Melbourne Airport, they were running low on fuel, but they couldn't land. And the reason they couldn't land was because there was a young boy, a Down syndrome boy, at the back of the plane on the floor who was very unwell and very unhappy. And he refused to get into his seat. So they put an announcement across the loudspeaker on the intercom on the plane. And they said, "Is there a teacher on board? Is there a special needs teacher on board?" And Sophie Murphy responded and said, "Yes, I'm a special needs teacher. Can you help?" "Yes, I can help." She went to the back of the plane, and here is Sharman on the floor, not very happy, not communicative, and she did what good teachers do. She said to herself, "I've got to build a relationship with this boy." She got down on the floor, sat next to him, made eye contact, lowered her tone, asked his name, asked him about his favourite book, Winnie the Pooh. Conversation started about Winnie the Pooh. And it wasn't long before a friendship emerged, and she was able to get him into a seat. Her parents were there saying, thank you, across the aisle. And everybody buckled up for their landing into Melbourne. When the plane landed, everybody sat silent on the plane. Nobody moved. They allowed Sophie and Sharman, hand in hand, to walk down the aisle to the applause of everybody on the plane. As they stood there, just outside the plane, people came past and said thanks to Sophie. There was a doctor's wife who came up and said, "My husband was very, very interested in what you were doing. In fact, he was busy taking notes all the time so he could use it in his practice." So teachers are powerful, and across the world we are working with some 2 million students in Adventist education, the largest Protestant school system in the world. It's a system to be proud of. And our teachers are working hard to build relationships with students each and every day. But you know what? They're doing more than just building relationships and friendships with young people. They are doing something more powerful. They are influencing young people for eternity. And that is incredibly powerful and incredibly important. They're leading young people to Jesus. This picture that I've got up here is a story that I love to tell. Can you see some of the characters in the picture? Can you work out who they are? It's from a few years ago now. It's at Nunawading Christian School in Melbourne. And the characters on the stage, in pink is the then Prime Minister, Julia Gillard. And next to her is the Education Minister, Peter Garrett. They came because it was a marginal seat in this area and they were trying to win some votes. And they came there into the middle of the quadrangle. You can imagine the scene, all the little kids there, the primary school kids waving their Australian flags, proud of their country. And Julia Gillard comes to the middle. And she decided she was going to engage with the students. So she asked a question of the students. Tell us, what is it, kids, that you love about your school? Hands shot up, and she chose a little girl right in the middle. And what this little girl said was just gold for me as an Adventist educator. She put up her hand, Julia asked her, and the little girl said, I love my school because my teachers teach me about Jesus. Wow, what a beautiful story. What a beautiful story. And poor old Julia Gillard, who is, of course, an atheist, really didn't know which way to look or what to say at that point in time. But bless that teacher and bless all of our teachers who are influencing young people to Christ each and every day. In the book Education, we find the purpose of Adventist education is to aid the student in comprehending these principles and entering into that relationship with Christ, which will make them the controlling power in the life. It should be the teacher's first effort and constant aim. The teacher who accepts this aim, in truth, is a co-worker with Christ, a labourer together with God. As teachers, you are co-workers with Christ because the work of education and redemption are one. It was Christ who gave them to be pastors, teachers, to prepare God's people for works of service, so that the body of Christ may be built up. From him, the whole body, joined and held together by every supporting ligament, grows and builds itself up in love as each part does its work. That word prepare means to heal, to make whole, to redeem. And this is the work of Adventist education. Ellen White goes on in the book Education and says, in order to understand what is comprehended in the work of education, we need to consider both the nature of man and the purpose of God in creating him. We need to consider also the change in man's condition through the coming of the knowledge of evil and God's plan to still fulfill his glorious purpose in the education of the human race. We, in Adventist education, are all about opening children's eyes to God's great story, God's big story, the great controversy that's playing out in our world and in our universe. And in Adventist education, we are focusing really strongly in all aspects of our curriculum on this big story. We are looking at our curriculum documentations through four key lenses: creation, fall, redemption, and restoration. And our curriculum documentation that's taught at Avondale right through our schools is encouraging our teachers to make sure that in everything they teach, they are ensuring they're bringing these four lenses into focus. We, at times, can be daunted by what we are facing in Australian society. No doubt you have seen statistics such as these in front of you, where we look and we see just how many people have an interest in religious things in the world today. And then we look at research such as that conducted by David Kinnaman and Gabe Lyons in the book Unchristian. And here they look at young people in the age of 16 to 29, and they list what is the image that people have of Christians in the world today. It's rather interesting and sobering when you start to read through and look at the perceptions that people have And when 70% of our young people in our schools come from the broader community, they're bringing these attitudes, these challenges to us. This could be another slide that we could unpack from an Australian perspective. They asked the question, do you believe being an active part of a church community insists in these areas of your life? The spiritual, the mental, the social, the relational, the vocational, the financial, the physical. And when you look at those figures and you look at the red section, particularly down the bottom, where it talks about what the community thinks that we are not able to assist, you will see that it is very, very significant that their support and belief in what church communities can do is extremely low. But we, as Adventist educators, have the privilege of working with the children and their families. We have the opportunity of changing the temperature of Australian society through the way we interact with young people each and every day. In her book, Total Truth, Nancy Pearcey talks about the way in which society today is sharply divided. On the lower story of the house, we have the public sphere, where you can believe things if it's scientifically proven. Scientific knowledge is king. We accept it as truth. But then in the upper story is the private sphere, the realm of personal preference. You believe what you want to believe, I'll believe what I believe, and we just get on together and we don't intersect. That is what religion, that's what Christianity has been reduced to in society today, the realm of personal preference, private belief. That is not what we want our schools to be all about. We need to stand in firm opposition to that kind of perception. We believe in God's great story and that He reigns supreme and will bring this to a conclusion. Just a couple of more quick slides that illustrate the malaise we face. This is Angela Shanahan commenting on, in The Australian, on the Safe Schools inroads that has been made into public education. The natural family is number one enemy of every extreme ideology, she states. And then you can go to the social commentator Andrew Bolt, who writes regularly in the Australian newspaper. And he has some interesting comments on where our society is heading. These attacks are part of a disturbing pattern, he says. Everywhere Christians are being harassed out of the public space. I am no Christian, he says, but I do have faith in Christianity. Will we be this safe once it's gone? And then you can come to other commentators such as Greg Sheridan, also writing the Australian newspaper, who states that the aggressive secularism of public culture has become increasingly a state religion in itself and will use coercive powers of the state to enforce its new orthodoxy. And didn't we see incredible vitriol around the whole marriage debate just recently, where if you had a view that was oppositional, you were harried off the public stage. And in Adventist education, we face further challenges. Professor Patrick Parkinson wrote a report for the government a few years back now, and it was called For Kids' Sake. And he commented on the state of young people in Australia, and they're very close to having a Royal Commission at this time on what's happening with young people in Australian society. At-risk behaviour in so many areas, and mental health of young people declining sharply is a huge concern for Australian society. They're suggesting that young people under 25 in Australian society, up to 50%, either are diagnosed with a mental condition or are highly anxious or highly stressed. That's a huge concern, and we have huge work to do in Adventist education. We need to stand for the right. I've just got one more slide here. Hopefully I've got them in the right order. We go back to the ultimate purpose of Adventist education from Ellen White. True education means more than a preparation for the life that now is. It means more than a preparation for the life that now is, It has to do with the whole being and with the whole period of existence possible to man. It is a harmonious development of the physical, the mental, and the spiritual powers. It prepares the student for the joy of service in this world and the higher joy of service in the world to come. As Adventist educators, we're all about preparing young people with hope, with purpose, with direction, meaning, and who are able to stand for the right, even though the cards are stacked against them as they take their place in God's great story. And I can tell you many stories of teachers who are involved in Stormco and other mission outreach. Year 12 groups that instead of going to schoolies are running mission trips, which is fantastic. Let me share another story with you. It's the story of Viktor Yushchenko. It's one of my favourite stories. In 2004, the Iron Curtain of the Ukraine was slowly lifting, and Viktor Yushchenko dared to stand in the presidential race against the established Communist Party. It was a dirty election, and he almost lost his life through dioxin poisoning. It left him scarred and disfigured, as you will see from the second image of the same man. He stuck to his guns, and on election day, he had a clear 10% majority lead. But the government, through fraud and outright lies, managed to reverse the results. And on state-run radio and television, the following words were ringing out. It said, "Ladies and gentlemen, we announce that the challenger, Viktor Yushchenko, has been decisively defeated." However, the government authorities did not account for the translation for the hearing impaired that occurred in the small screen in the right-hand corner of the image. And enter the stage Natalia Dimitruk, whose parents were mute, and she had grown up in this household, but this brave woman decided that she was not going to listen to the lies of the government and tell the truth. Have a look what this brave lady who risked her life had to say as the government lies were being told. Have a read. This is what she was signing in the corner. Now you can imagine what happened. People started texting, people started emailing, and an uproar resulted to the extent that it wasn't that much longer before there was a massive demonstration in the streets of Kiev. They called it the Orange Revolution, where over 1 million people came to protest what had happened. And a new election was held, and Viktor Yushchenko was elected as the Prime Minister. You know, I think that in Adventist schools, we are exactly what Natalia Dimitruk represented. We are the truth in the small screen in the corner. While the world is saying success comes through image, power, money, the small screen is saying that as teachers, you are the person who says, don't believe the big screen. They're lying. Kids, build your life on kingdom values. Accept Jesus and be part of the restoration. And schools are the real place where this can occur. I haven't got time to look at this particular slide, but it's about mission drift. And you can read the quote there regarding what is the view of Chris Horse and somebody Greer, I forget his name, who has written a book called Mission Drift, and how, if we're not careful, we can slip into a demise. Hopefully I'm reading the right slide. John Collier, who is an Anglican school principal in Sydney and an academic, said this about the opportunity for us to partner in evangelism and outreach. In fact, young people are by and large not to be found in churches, but they are in schools. The opportunity, therefore, in Christian schools which have the freedom to advocate a faith position is both immense and strategic. Can you say amen to that? Because I believe it with all my heart. He goes on to talk in this vein, but I won't go further. I want to share this slide with you as I conclude. As teachers, you need to know that it is your beliefs, it is your values, it's your thinking that is going to impact the curriculum. It's going to impact the culture of the school in which you work. If you are connected deeply to Jesus Christ, your beliefs and values, what you teach and what you share and what you think will radiate out into your students and fill their hearts with a love for Christ. Let's remember what Adventist education is at its core, primarily about leading young people to Christ, about developing character, and about helping them to live lives of service to God and others, now and in eternity. These are our beliefs and values that we need to reflect on because they're going to play out in our schools. And as I conclude, let me tell you one quick story about a young man who was the school captain in South Australia at Prescott College. His name is Sam Madigan. He went through Prescott Primary Northern for all of his primary years. Didn't come from a Christian home, but loved the school, loved the teachers, loved the journey. He went on, after not making a decision in primary school, into Prescott College, and he went all through to year 12. There just enjoying the school life, the relationships he had with teachers, and was exposed to our Christian values. He was exposed to Jesus, weeks of prayers, but never made a decision. But he became school captain in year 12 and worked with the school captain. He worked with the chaplain, and it was about 3 or 4 weeks in to the school year that he came to Leighton Heiss, the chaplain at that time, and said, "Leighton, I want to do that thing." And do you know what that thing was? He wanted to accept Jesus Christ and be baptized. Sometimes it takes time. Sometimes it takes 12. And I want to say to you that if we get to the end of year 12 and we hadn't led a young person to Christ, in many ways, as Adventist educators, we've failed. But hey, the Holy Spirit still works. And let's not forget that. This is our vision statement for Adventist education. Let's never forget that we are all about creating thriving, disciple-making Adventist schools. And let's also never forget that we are, in the classrooms each and every day, Christ's ambassadors, that you yourselves are our letter written on our hearts, known and read by everyone. You show that you are a letter from Christ, the result of our ministry, written not with ink, but with the Spirit of the living God, not on tablets of stone, but on tablets of human hearts. Thank you.